Picture, for just a moment, that you're standing at the precipice of human history. Behind you lies everything we believed we knew about the universe, while in front of you looms something so transformative and violent that it threatens to dismantle our understanding. Because last night, precisely at 11:47 p.m. Universal Time, an event occurred. It was neither a rumor nor a glitch, nor was it the result of a misaligned sensor or a noisy graph. This was a tangible, measurable event that observatories across every continent simultaneously recorded, compelling the entire astronomical community to engage in emergency coordination within minutes. And no, it wasn't a supernova, nor a fast radio burst, nor a gamma-ray flash or gravitational wave. It was something that doesn't neatly fit into the categories we've relied on for the past century. If you've been keeping up with the unfolding enigma of 3I Atlas, you already know this object has been peculiar since its discovery. However, what transpired last night raises the stakes to an entirely different level. Before we delve further, please hit like and stick with me. Not for the algorithm, but because understanding what just happened diminishes our sense of isolation in processing it. Last night, the entity we refer to as 3I Atlas, the interstellar visitor that has perplexed us regarding comet physics for months, executed an action no natural comet, asteroid, or stray rock has ever accomplished. It performed a maneuver, not a minor drift or a gentle push from outgassing, nor a correction we could dismiss as a modeling error. It was a controlled, directed, and intelligent alteration of its trajectory through space, a deliberate acceleration, a precise adjustment in speed and direction that resembles what one would expect from a vehicle, not a mere rock. For the past 14 hours, my phone has been incessantly vibrating. I've spoken with researchers from NASA, ESA, JAXA, and various independent observatories. Everyone is exhausted, wired, and trying to avoid the one word we've been conditioned to evade for decades, as the raw data being shared privately is astonishing, defying the application of orbital mechanics we've used for natural objects. It contradicts our understanding of energy budgets, propulsion systems, and the capabilities of a 30 billion-ton block of ice and rock. Here's what we know. At exactly 11:47:23 p.m. UT, every infrared instrument observing 3I Atlas recorded the same thing: a sudden brightness spike by a factor of 12 within the infrared spectrum. It wasn't a gradual increase, nor a flare that developed over minutes as ice sublimated. One moment it was normal, in the next, it shone brighter than some stars in the field. To envision that, think of being in a room at a typical temperature, and in a heartbeat, the air around you becomes hotter than the sun's surface. That's the scale of energy release we're discussing. Natural comets don't operate this way. Sublimation is typically messy, chaotic, and lumpy. It burps and sputters rather than behaving like a simple on-off switch. Dr. Sarah Martinez, who was on duty at the infrared observatory that first raised the alarm, initially thought her detector had malfunctioned. She rebooted her system, recalibrated, but only when the cross-checks began coming in did her skepticism waver. Spitzer confirmed the same spike. Facilities in Hawaii saw it. Telescopes in Chile recorded it. Even radio observatories that weren't set to capture light variations detected correlated changes in thermal emissions. Independent teams from different continents using various instruments observed 3I Atlas ignite like a furnace, maintaining that intensity for precisely 14 minutes before shutting down just as suddenly as it began. During that time, localized regions of its surface reached around 1200 Kelvin, sufficient to melt aluminum, warp steel, and vaporize most ice instantaneously. Yet the overall structure of the object remained intact. No massive fragmentation, no catastrophic breakup, no signatures of comet disintegration. Just a controlled, high-energy event, localized to specific areas followed by silence. An hour later, when tracking networks updated their orbital calculations, the real shock set in. 3I Atlas had altered its velocity by approximately 4.3 km/h. Let that resonate. That's an object with a mass on the scale of tens of billions of tons suddenly accelerating by 4,300 meters every second. The energy necessary to accomplish that in just 14 minutes equals harnessing all the sunlight that reaches the entire Earth in a single day and channeling it into that one object, not over centuries, but in just a quarter of an hour. Dr. Robert Chen at MIT calculated the figures using standard rocketry equations, attempting to achieve that delta V with chemical rockets, like those we employ to launch spacecraft, would require over 200 billion tons of propellant. That's more mass than the object itself. Even if 3I Atlas were hollow and filled to the brim with the best-known chemical fuel, executing this maneuver within such a time span would remain impossible. Switching to ion drives doesn't improve the situation. Ion propulsion is incredibly efficient, but with low power, it accumulates significant changes over months or years, not minutes. Even the most optimistic designs for ion engines cannot deliver a 4.3-kilometer kick to an object of this magnitude in 14 minutes. The energy requirements alone would surpass anything we've ever constructed. Thus, whatever instigated this event is neither chemical nor ion-based. It's a propulsion system we have neither tested nor seriously engineered at this scale. Scientists can only assert that this was a controlled energy release utilizing physics we have yet to grasp. And then we encounter the unsettling part. The maneuver was not random. Before this phenomenon, the predicted trajectory of 3I Atlas suggested it would pass Earth at a distance of about 0.08 astronomical units in early January 2026, regarded as a safe and interesting flyby. After the maneuver, the new orbit now puts it at approximately 0.04 AU, a distance halved, and the date has been shifted to late December rather than early January. In other words, the object is now approaching sooner and closer, with its vector more closely aligned to the inner solar system and our orbital path. In natural comet behavior, if outgassing occurs unevenly, you might see slight deviations or nudges that shift it a little one way or another. However, a perfectly timed, precisely executed burn that halves the missed distance and advances the rendezvous date is something entirely different. You don't witness a smooth vector change akin to a calculated course correction. This alone could rewrite critical chapters in every celestial mechanics textbook on the planet. But the universe seemed to want to up the ante for one night because, during those same 14 minutes where the infrared spike and orbital alteration were detected, instruments across nearly the entire electromagnetic spectrum recorded another phenomenon. Signals. Radio observatories began picking up broadband emissions spanning around 400 MHz to tens of gigahertz. This was not mere noise, but structured, modulated patterns. Optical telescopes with fast photometers captured flashes on the millisecond scale in narrow blue and green bands, blinking at precise intervals. X-ray observatories detected high-energy photon pulses that didn't match any known natural background sources. When signal analysts began dissecting these data streams, the hairs on their arms stood on end. These emissions weren't random. They contained headers and repeating segments at the start of each burst. They exhibited synchronization markers typical of timing references added when expecting to align multiple channels, and they showed error correction patterns similar to redundancy schemes utilized for reliable data transmission in noisy environments. Dr. Jennifer Williams at SETI, who has devoted her career to avoiding overinterpretations of tantalizing but ambiguous signals, remarked during a private call that later leaked, "If this pattern originated from a star hundreds of light years away, we would categorize it as a technosignature without hesitation. That's how distinct it is, how far it stands apart from nature's chaotic randomness." The optical flashes behaved like laser pulses, coherent and sharply defined. The timing jitter lingered in the microsecond range, indicating that whatever generated these signals possesses a clock and values precision. The X-ray pulses bore signs of particle acceleration within strong electromagnetic fields, the kind observed in laboratory accelerators and extreme astrophysical environments. Yet here, they synchronized with the radio and optical behaviors. Moreover, embedded within the broader radio emissions was something even more intentional, a repeating primer. Every 427 seconds, a narrow carrier emerged at the hydrogen line around 1.42 GHz. This frequency has long been discussed in SETI literature as the obvious channel for communication. Hydrogen, being the universe's most common element, renders this line as a universal dial tone. On that carrier was a sequence that would be familiar to anyone who has studied hypothetical interstellar messaging. ascending prime numbers, followed by the Fibonacci sequence, then approximations of p and the golden ratio, eventually evolving into increasingly intricate arrangements that could be mapped onto grids and simple diagrams. This closely resembles concepts humans have proposed for interstellar communication, intending to convey to unknown intelligences that we grasp math and patterns. We are not mere noise. It appears that whoever or whatever is behind this is employing the same logic in reverse, as if they anticipated the sentient beings on the third planet would be engaged and needed guidance on how to interpret what follows. Once this realization hit, everything escalated quickly. Within hours, ESA quietly drafted and then publicly declared a framework for an emergency fast-track intercept mission. The strategy was brutally straightforward. Use existing propulsion stages, combine them with a basic probe stripped of all non-essential systems, and launch within 8 months on a direct trajectory to intercept 3I Atlas along its new path. China, eager to avoid missing out on a historic moment, signaled its intent to launch its intercept mission even sooner, capitalizing on its heavy-lift rockets and lunar infrastructure. Meanwhile, Russia, with its long-standing prowess in radio astronomy, mobilized its entire array of dishes and quickly began reporting deeper structural layers embedded in the signals, subcarriers hidden within subcarriers, with modulation patterns that appeared to multiplex multiple channels, possibly transmitting varied data simultaneously. Behind the scenes, representatives from the government, military strategists, and scientific advisors are engaging in emergency discussions. While the term threat isn't being openly mentioned, one can imagine the inquiries being raised if this is indeed a vehicle and not merely a rock. Who constructed it? What is its purpose? Is the course correction merely an attempt to observe us more closely? Or is it a rendezvous? Are we being studied, or just an obstacle to some other objective? People continue to ask my perspective on what may happen next. The truthful answer is that no one knows. We don't yet understand if we're observing a singular craft, or perhaps an automated probe network masquerading as a comet. We remain uncertain whether the signals are directed at us, or if we simply happened to overhear a communication routine running for eons. What we do know is this. After last night, after November 15th, 2025, at 11:47 p.m. UT, the narrative of humanity has changed. There exists one version of our history where we believed we were alone, and everything beyond the atmosphere was merely silent rock and fire. And then, there's this new reality where we've acquired, for the first time, empirical and repeatable evidence indicating that something out there is utilizing technology and physics beyond our current understanding. On a personal note, I sincerely hope this maneuver was driven by curiosity rather than hostility. I hope that the sequence of numbers and constants represents a handshake codec, not a countdown to something more ominous. I wish that whoever created and controls 3I Atlas finds something in us worth engaging with, preserving, and understanding. Because if this object sought to showcase what genuine power looks like, it chose an astonishingly gentle method to do so. It could have remained elusive, could have disregarded us entirely. Instead, it illuminated itself, communicated through mathematics, and drew nearer. Moving forward, our task is both painfully simple and exceedingly challenging. We must observe. We must listen. We must analyze every morsel of information captured by our receivers. We'll debate in conference rooms about what, if anything, we should respond with. We'll design interceptors and hope they endure long enough during the encounter to send back a picture, a spectrum, a whisper of what this entity appears like up close. The universe has just provided an answer to a question we weren't ready to hear voiced. We are not alone. The forthcoming inquiries are even more perilous. What lies beyond? What does it desire? And what role, if any, do we serve in its plans? For the moment, all we can do is remain informed and stay inquisitive. This is not a time to look away. If you wish to continue following this as it develops, encompassing trajectory updates, signal analyses, mission designs, and initial attempts to decode whatever is intertwined in that hydrogen line primer, stay here. The cosmos is evidently not finished communicating. Click on the next video, and let's venture together into whatever lies ahead.